We're used to thinking of history as a story of human agency, the unfolding tale of our linguistic, cultural, and civilizational evolution. How our intelligence and technology progressed until we eventually became the psychologically sophisticated beings that we are today. But this ignores the agency originating from a different sort of entity, one emanating from a realm beyond human existence, an entity pivotal in shaping the trajectory of humanity. From time immemorial, human beings have been influenced by supernatural beings known as gods. These deities assumed the responsibility of steering humanity away from its primal instincts, and exerted a profound influence on our collective destiny. The chasm that now separates us from the animal kingdom is, in no small part, attributed to these divine forces, compelling us to transcend our genetically predetermined way of life. In a staggeringly short period of time, we transitioned from a state akin to our animal counterparts to one characterized by technological sophistication, moral consciousness, cultural richness, and intellectual acumen. By obediently following the directives of these divine entities, we ourselves have transformed into godlike entities, possessing both the power to create and the potential for destruction. Please check the description for a series of videos that explains this further if you're not already familiar with the idea of the bicameral mind. While it may seem preposterous to propose the involvement of supernatural entities in human history, a closer examination of the historical record reveals an abundance of evidence supporting such a notion. Throughout the ages, tangible remnants of their presence have endured, a multitude of statues erected in their honor, ruins of the very temples they were believed to inhabit, and an extensive array of carvings, paintings, and significantly, writings. These writings not only document the very words attributed to them, but also chronicle the actions in which they partook. As the historical timeline unfolds, we encounter instances of these celestial beings forsaking the people they once governed, prompting humanity to embark on desperate endeavors to re-establish contact. It may seem challenging to fathom, but there was a time in history when the gods seemed to be tangibly present and asserted their dominion as rulers of humanity by directly issuing commands for us to heed. In doing so, the gods orchestrated one of the most remarkable events in the history of the universe, the emergence of civilization. One of the best known civilizations which the gods founded was ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt stands as an awe-inspiring testament to the legacy of the human species, enduring for over 3 millennia, with a cultural continuity that is nothing short of remarkable. Central to the civilization were the gods, who played an integral role in shaping every facet of Egyptian life, such as through facilitating societal organization, governance, and daily routines. The monumental structures, such as the majestic pyramids and temples, reflected not only the Egyptians' architectural prowess, but also their unwavering devotion to the divine. The enduring stability and cohesion of ancient Egyptian society are exemplified by the preservation of cultural practices, hieroglyphic writing, and artistic styles throughout its long history. The surviving writings from ancient Egypt unveil a narrative of a civilization largely governed by the divine, where the gods exercised rule and issued divine commands to the people, often conveyed through the pharaoh, who served as their earthly emissary. Entrusted with the sacred duty of communing with the great gods, the pharaoh acted in strict accordance with their divine will, as the Egyptologist Dominique Lefebvre wrote. When visiting Egyptian temples nowadays, it is possible to read/hear the conversations between the king and various divinities, the divine words which have been carved on the walls. As an indispensable intermediary between gods and men, the pharaoh, the priest par excellence, is always shown as the one who faces the gods during the ritual acts of daily divine worship and certain religious ceremonies. A litany of juxtaposed scenes thus depicts the king presenting an offering to different deities with the appropriate gestures, instruments, and words. In return, the god grants benefits to the sovereign and through him to Egypt as a whole. These benefits are uttered directly by the god in a speech that is usually placed above his face. Examples are innumerable. It was this divine relationship between gods and men which turned Egypt into the marvelous civilization we know of today. In this video, we embark on a journey to explore the history of ancient Egypt through a fresh perspective, not merely as a chronicle of human agency, but rather as the unfolding narrative of divine entities and the directives they imparted to their mortal subjects. The Nile River has served as a lifeline for thousands of years. more than 10,000 years ago, its irregular flooding allowed many distinct cultures to flourish and develop, from hunter-gatherer societies to agricultural societies, a transition which required a greater degree of societal coordination and cooperation. Before the culture that would become ancient Egypt emerged in this area, numerous cities dotted the banks of the Nile. During this incomprehensibly vast span of time, these cities, though small by contemporary standards, housed populations ranging from 5,000 to 10,000 residents. Significantly, these population sizes represented a monumental leap in the scale of collectivization and cooperation during that era. Each of these cities was ruled by a different god, usually alongside a pantheon unique to that city. The gods, being metaphysical entities residing in a world distinct from the physical world, relied on issuing commands to their human subjects. Each god enlisted the help of numerous priests who had the task of communicating with them, interpreting their demands, and executing their will. These shamanic priests served as intermediaries between the divine and the earthly realms, and to commune with these celestial entities, the priests engaged in rituals centered around statues crafted in the likeness of them, establishing a line of communication between the tangible and the metaphysical. The temples represented a fragment of the divine on the mortal plane. As Egyptologist David P. Silverman wrote, this transcendence was facilitated through the allocation of special space for communing with the conceptualized deity. These specialized areas, which would later give rise to temples, were places where some form of divinity could be approached, venerated, supplicated to, or worshipped. To visualize it in concrete form, the Egyptians used a statue, or other type of related symbol or image, and in these locations, appropriate ritual could take place. Eventually, these structures became quite elaborate, and were understood as residences for the god. It is important to realize that each city could be home to hundreds of gods, with temples accommodating each of them. Furthermore, cities often had more than one temple, allowing worship of a single god across various locations. While each city acknowledged a primary god as its true ruler, numerous other gods were worshipped, each with their dedicated priests for communication and rituals. Eventually, each major god in a city became represented by a chief priest, chosen by the deity to rule on their behalf. The god's ability to rule the city was facilitated through chief priest's connection to the divine, often involving direct communication, where gods issued commands to their chosen shamanic rulers. These societies eventually coalesced into two distinct political entities, known as Upper Egypt in the south. It's called Upper Egypt because it was up on the Nile River, and Lower Egypt in the north, each comprising numerous cities. Each city was governed by a tutelary deity, some of whom would later rise to prominence as notable gods of Egypt, such as Hathor, Sobek, Ra, Khnum, and Thoth. Noteworthy among the Lower Egyptian deities were Ptah, the lord of Memphis, which would later become the capital of unified Egypt, and Neith, the queen of the city of Sais. In Upper Egypt, the cow goddess Bat held the position of queen in the city of Seshesh, also known as Hu, while Horus assumed the role of lord in Nekhen, later renamed Hierakonpolis, or City of the Falcon. The powerful, falcon-headed god Horus, during this era, emerged as a formidable war deity, harboring ambitions to rule the entirety of Egypt. From Nekhen, Horus, driven by a relentless desire for dominance, orchestrated a military campaign, directing his priests to conquering neighboring territories on his behalf. Already in control of several cities in Upper Egypt, including the significant city of Edfu, Horus's armies, operating from his cult centers, extended their dominion over the entire Upper Egypt. Recognizing the challenges of directly overthrowing the ruling gods of each city, Horus sought their willing submission and cooperation. To achieve this, he likely forged an alliance with the powerful cow goddess Bat, reigning queen of the city of Seshesh, who commanded a substantial army. Together, the followers of Horus and Bat completed the successful conquest of all of Lower Egypt. This intricate dynamic reveals that interactions between gods were multifaceted, characterized not only by competition, but also by the potential for cooperation and alliances. Following the successful consolidation of control of Upper Egypt, Horus, alongside his steadfast lieutenant Bat, shifted focus towards Lower Egypt in the north. Much like his earlier campaign in Upper Egypt, Horus had already established a significant presence in the lower regions. Prior to the assault, he governed the cities of Letopolis and Tajaru, and his influence extended through numerous temples scattered across other cities. With the ferocity of a hawk, the followers of Horus, bolstered by the followers of Bat, launched a series of offensives into Lower Egypt. Eventually, the culmination of these endeavors was achieved under the leadership of the priest of Horus named Narmer. He succeeded in the monumental task of unifying Upper and Lower Egypt, thereby ascending to the position of the very first king of a consolidated Egyptian state. This marked the advent of the first dynasty of Egypt, with Narmer as its inaugural ruler, setting the stage for the establishment of the grand political entity we now recognize as the pharaoh-led civilization. But the word pharaoh wasn't actually used back then, and so we'll refer to him as the king. From this pivotal juncture onwards, the association between Horus and the kingship of Egypt became indelible, with Horus being acknowledged as the true king of Egypt, his authority channeled through his priestly emissary. Images of Horus were depicted alongside the king, signifying his integral role in the monarchy. His name would forever be included in the names of the kings of Egypt. The Horus name was a royal title, often represented using a sarik, a hieroglyphic symbol depicting a palace facade. The sarik showcased the name of the king, nestled beneath the emblem of Horus, serving as a powerful symbolic indication that the king was, in essence, a servant or representative of Horus. Here's the sarik for the third king of the dynasty, whose name means defender of Horus. Here's the sarik for the fourth king, whose name means serpent of Horus. The fact that the king's name is shown like this, as part Horus and part man, to me is a clear indication of his bicameral nature. Through their Horus name, each king aligned themselves with the sacred authority embodied by Horus, reinforcing the divine nature of their kingship in the cultural and religious fabric of ancient Egypt. With the advent of the First Dynasty, Horus had become the lord over a vast territory, and this unprecedented event was commemorated with the creation of the Narmer palette. Revered by many as ancient Egypt's founding document, this significant artifact was discovered amid the archaeological remnants of the Temple of Horus at Nekhen, the very site where Horus initiated his conquest of Egypt. The palette bears carved images symbolizing the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. On the front, King Narmer is depicted wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt, while on the back, he wears the red crown of Lower Egypt. This visual representation signifies his status as the inaugural king of a unified Egypt. Before Narmer stands Horus, overseeing his mortal servant's execution of a prisoner, seemingly at Horus's behest. That Horus is the primary agent in this scene is suggested by a translation of the palette by Egyptologist Sir Alan Gardiner, which reads, "The falcon god Horus leads the captive inhabitants of the papyrus country. Horus is holding a man in bondage, and these papyrus flowers growing out of his body are a symbol of Lower Egypt. Thus, Horus is shown subjugating Lower Egypt, binding it with rope. Bovine figures on the palette represent the goddess Bat, an ally of Horus, and inscriptions confirm her allegiance to Horus, portraying her as a general in his army. Horus's accomplishments through his subjects mark a significant event in human history, as Egypt became one of the earliest examples of a highly centralized state comprised of multiple major cities. And like all states, Egypt instituted taxes. But unlike most states, the supreme ruler, Horus, personally visited every city in his kingdom for tax collection, in a biennial event known as the Following of Horus, as recorded in government records from the time. Before further delving into the narrative of Horus, it's essential to explore the intricate relationship between gods and men in ancient Egypt. The governance of this civilization hinged heavily upon maintaining a symbiotic connection with the divine, as humans relied on the wisdom and insight possessed by the gods. The nature of these divine entities was complex, as they were capable of assuming various forms, and even merging into singular entities, exemplified by the fusion of Amun and Ra into the god Amun-Ra. These gods wielded immense power, and were believed to be the architects of the natural world, while also existing in a realm separate from that of humans. The term used for these deities was Netcher, and interestingly, individuals who passed away were also considered Netcher. The formidable power attributed to these entities motivated humans to invest considerable effort into appeasing and communicating with them. The belief in the divine interconnectedness between gods and humans shaped the societal fabric of ancient Egypt, influencing religious practices, rituals, and the very governance of the civilization. In ancient Egypt, the king held a unique and central role as the sole individual capable of directly interceding with the gods. Regarded as the primary shaman, the king possessed the extraordinary ability to access the divine realm and to listen to the gods. This special connection aligned with the perception that the pharaoh was the only living person considered a god. As Stephen E. Thomas aptly noted, technically, only the king could officiate in the cult before the gods. He was considered to be the high priest of all the gods and goddesses of Egypt. This elevated status positioned the king not only as a political leader, but also as the paramount religious figure, serving as the primary intermediary between the mortal realm and the divine pantheon. However, practical considerations dictated that the king couldn't manage the multitude of gods alone, given their widespread presence across the land. To attend to the diverse array of gods, numerous priests were employed, each serving two primary purposes. Firstly, priests were entrusted with the task of communicating with the gods. This involved deciphering the will and intentions of the various deities, as well as asking the gods questions when deciding important matters. Priests could also convey the questions of commoners to the gods. A recording of this occurring involved a priest of the goddess Hathor, who asked anyone with petitions to tell him, and then he would convey them to Hathor. Another record from a notable priest of Amun, named Amenhotep, has him saying, "O people of Karnak, who wish to see Amun, come to me. I will transmit your requests because I am the herald of this god. I will transmit your word to Amun and Karnak. Give me an offering and pour a libation for me, because I am an intermediary nominated by the king to hear requests of the suppliant, to report to him the desires of Egypt." Secondly, priests were responsible for carrying out the cult of the god. This encompassed the performance of various rituals and the preparation of offerings as mandated by the respective deity. The cult rituals were considered vital for upholding the divine connection and appeasing the gods, and they were conducted within the sacred confines of the god's temple, a divine space where the deity resided, and from where their authority emanated. Temples typically housed more than one god, although a hierarchical structure among them was always present. Each god was symbolically represented by a statue, crafted by skilled artisans. To enable the god to truly inhabit the statue, and to facilitate communication through his vessel, priests performed a prominent ceremony known as the opening of the mouth. This prepared the statue to become a vessel for the god, and ensured that the god was able to speak through the statue. Various gods in ancient Egypt required their own distinct rituals, but a common practice was for the priest to initiate the ritual by declaring to the statue, "It is the king who has sent me to see the god." Following this declaration, the priest would prostrate himself before the statue, engaging in numerous purification rituals involving water or oil. Prayers and recitations were given in front of the statue as part of the ritual. To sustain the gods, a significant quantity of food was prepared, with the belief that the deities consumed the essence of these offerings. The priests, as a form of compensation for their services, would then partake in a share of the prepared food. These rituals were conducted with the expectation that the gods would continue to guide human affairs in a favorable manner, as it was necessary to keep the gods happy. In the early stages of ancient Egypt, the temples dedicated to the major gods were exclusive to an elite priestly class and closed to ordinary people. The priestly class held a monopoly on direct contact with the gods. Now, let us return to the story of Horus and the first dynasty of ancient Egypt. While Horus exerted rule over the entire kingdom, acknowledging the original rulers of each city within his new realm was crucial. To secure his position and to consolidate the union of Upper and Lower Egypt, Horus strategically formed an alliance with Neith, the goddess of the city of Sais, an influential city in Lower Egypt. This union between Nekhen and Upper Egypt and Sais and Lower Egypt was likely formalized through the sacred marriage of Horus and Neith. Historical evidence supports this alliance, as several kings of the first dynasty were found to be married to priests of Neith. Notably, Narmer himself may have married a woman named Neithotep, whose name translates to beloved of Neith. Furthermore, it is strongly suggested that one of these priests of Neith, named Merneith, assumed the role of Queen of Egypt and acted as regent until her son, Den, a priest of Horus, assumed leadership. This transitional period meant that, for a brief duration, Neith functioned as a ruler of Egypt until Horus reassumed control. In the new state, the capital was relocated to Memphis, where the original ruling god was Ptah. However, Horus did not simply supplant Ptah as the ruler of the city. Instead, Ptah retained his status as the ward of Memphis. Yet Memphis served as the seat of Horus's authority over the entirety of Egypt. Evidence supporting this coexistence is found in the continued service of the high priest of Ptah in the city. This high priest held a significant role as an official serving the king, illustrating a dynamic where Ptah essentially functioned as the mayor of the capital city of Memphis, while Horus held the title of the king of all of Egypt. In a later dynasty, a priest of Ptah named Sabu was described as the high priest of Ptah, cupbearer of the king, the favorite of his lord's heart, beloved of his lord, revered of Ptah, doing that which the god desired of him every day in the king's presence. This exemplifies the close relationship between the high priest of Ptah and the king, with Ptah being revered as a crucial figure in the governance of the kingdom. Records also indicate the king's visit to the temple of Ptah, suggesting a communion with the god or with his priest. Managing the vast Egyptian realm required Horus to intercede with various gods, as evidenced by records of his visits to other deities in their respective temples or cities. The idea of a deity visiting another deity in their temple featured prominently in a ceremony from a later era in Egyptian history. By this time, Horus was no longer married to Neith, but to the prominent deity Hathor. To celebrate their anniversary, a statue of Horus was carried from his prominent city Edfu to the city of Dendera, which was ruled by Hathor. Along the way, commoners had the chance to speak to the god, and would often put questions to the deity. The records of many such questions have survived today, including a man asking the god if his brother stole his mat. But let's shift our attention back to the First Dynasty. Horus directed the kings to defend Egypt from external threats, and to extend the influence of Horus into foreign territories. As part of this expansion, numerous cult centers dedicated to Horus were established in Nubia, the kingdom to the south of Egypt. However, within Horus's realm, his shamanic priests often found themselves entangled in power struggles to secure the coveted position of chief priest. Such internal strife was common in the ruling dynasties of a vast kingdom like Egypt. In the pursuit of power, these priests engaged in familial conflicts, with sons violently overthrowing fathers, and distant relatives raising armies to stage coups and seize control. The followers of Horus, eager to prove their loyalty and competence, eventually turned against each other. This internal strife contributed to the downfall of the First Dynasty, and paved the way for the emergence of a new family of Horus priests, the Second Dynasty. This new family possibly rose to power due to their perceived ability to communicate effectively with Horus and the other gods of Egypt. And while Horus remained the supreme ruler of Egypt for now, there was a brief moment when this changed. The god Seth was an ancient god, and references to him can be found dating from proto-historic times. The animal represented by him is not known for certain. It could be an aardvark or an extinct animal. Originally, Seth was a god of the Upper Egyptian city of Nakada, which was conquered by Horus during his campaign to seize control of all of Upper Egypt. However, during the Second Dynasty, Seth may have temporarily usurped the throne from Horus as an act of revenge. To do this, he recruited a man named Peribsen to be his emissary. Peribsen might have been a member of the Second Dynastic family, and he may have turned away from Horus and aligned himself with Seth, eventually becoming the chief priest of Seth. The statue of Seth within a temple might have played a role in communicating with Peribsen and influencing him to carry out Seth's bidding. Alternatively, Peribsen may have been an outsider who had always been loyal to Seth. Regardless of his origins, by following the commands of his god Seth, Peribsen orchestrated a coup and seized the Egyptian kingship. This seizure of power marked Seth's brief rule over Egypt, reflected in Peribsen's divine name, which departed from the customary inclusion of Horus and instead bore the image of Seth. This is visible in Peribsen's Sarik. All other royal Sariks depict Horus, but this is the only one where Horus was replaced with Seth. Hence, Peribsen's divine name became Seth Peribsen, indicating the shift in divine authority during this unique period. Seizing the throne of such a formidable kingdom from a powerful deity like Horus proved to be a risky endeavor for Seth. The transition of power appears to have caused a division between Upper and Lower Egypt, with the still loyal followers of Horus maintaining control in Lower Egypt, while the followers of Seth held sway in Upper Egypt. This division led to a brief civil war, as the two factions vied for dominance. Ultimately, the followers of Horus emerged victorious, reclaiming control. The subsequent king, Kasekemwi, adopted a Sarik name that incorporated both Horus and Seth, signaling the reunification of the kingdom. This joint Sarik name indicated that Horus and Seth were now recognized as the co-rulers of Egypt, symbolizing a resolution to the internal conflicts that had temporarily divided the nation. But this brief state of reunification under the Second Dynasty did not last, as a different family of Horus followers ascended to the throne, restoring Horus as the sole ruler of Egypt. They likely took advantage of the chaos caused by the recent civil war to do so. In this third dynasty of ancient Egypt, Seth was no longer added to the names of kings, while the association with Horus still persisted. This historical conflict between Horus and Seth laid the foundation for the famous mythological rivalry between the two deities, a reoccurring theme in ancient Egyptian mythology. The ancient Egyptians imbued this myth with significant symbolism, using it to elevate the stature of the king. Moreover, it served as a symbolic representation of the political situation, wherein the two halves of Egypt experienced frequent divisions and reunifications. From this moment on, Seth was generally reviled in Egypt, seen as an evil god of chaos and malevolence, who used Egypt's enemies against it in an ambitious desire to become king once again. This negative association with evil, however, did not completely eradicate the worship of Seth, especially in his original cities, where some Egyptians continued to revere him, despite the broader societal disdain. Now, with the founding of the Third Dynasty, we commence what historians have called the Old Kingdom of Egypt, and it would rise to fame thanks largely to the enormous pyramids which serve as traces of its legacy, a story which we will continue in another video.